So firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has joined. I'm really excited for this. Each and every one of the guests are really exciting, and we're going to have a great conversation. So basically, this is on behalf of London Society, which you'll see was established in 1912, which obviously you're already aware of. But what I really loved about their organization is actually the motto, which is valuing the past and looking to the future. And I feel like it really ties in nicely to the concept of our conversation and the future of work. And this is one thing that I'm passionate about myself, and also BDG as a company as well. And I think it's really going to be an exciting conversation, because each one of the participant guests that we have here all have different expertise in different parts of the field of the future of work and actually digital, and have a really exciting and interesting idea behind it. So the actual concept of the conversation fundamentally is around the idea of children designing the future of workspace in Minecraft. So we're going to kind of talk about that, but then also talk about the wider subject of design and the digital age and various other topics. So the way that I kind of wanted to begin this was actually by introducing each of the guests, because I think it's really interesting to give you a bit of an insight into who they are and what they have done, and then I'll kind of go through it and basically ask some key questions about their realm and their areas of expertise, I guess. So we'll start with Javier, if you could do a little intro into who you are.
Hi, hello, really happy to be here. I'm Javier, I'm from Spain. I'm an architect, but also working as a designer for workplace. I work in BDG, work with Jorge. I'm quite focused on design, but I also really interested in being active part of the technical parts and all related with digital modeling and media involved in the process of design.
Thanks very much for that. And the next person is Alex, who can give us a little intro into what he does, which is many things.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm a freelance graphic designer based in London, and I focus primarily on brand and brand design. But I also do strategy and illustration and animation, and more recently 3D as well, which I'll be talking a little bit about later. So yeah.
And our final guest as well, who's coming from New York, it's Jorge, who can explain a little bit more about what he does as well, please.
Hi, I'm Jorge Mendez, and I'm a creative director at BDG, and currently focused on projects in North America. So it's I'm pretty happy to, I was in London and pretty happy to be part of kind of like being back in London with all of you.
No, so thank you so much to all the guests for their introduction. I'm also Rachel, so I'm just sort of hosting it this evening. So I don't have the level of expertise that these guys do, but the idea is basically, as I said before, that I'm going to speak with each and every one of them for 10 minutes about their expertise. And then at the end, we'll just do a little joint question, and then we'll have Q&A. So feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box, and if they're sort of relevant at the time, we'll talk about them at that moment. But at the end, we will go through, we've got about 10 minutes of question time. So don't feel like you've been ignored. Your questions are all really valid and interesting. And again, also feel free to post about this on social media as well. You can tag the London Society and also BDG Architecture as well. So we'll begin with Javier. So basically the first question for you is, how can digital methods of modeling change the way that we'll design workspaces in the future? And predominantly for me, what I'm quite interested in is if you could give a bit of an introduction in terms of the technical digital packages that maybe you use on a day-to-day basis, and then also kind of the power of those in terms of the design that you're building.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. This is a conversation that we had a lot of times, that we are so lucky to be part of a generation who has lived both of the real life and digital life. So all of us is starting doing plans, drawing by hand, using block models. And now we have these new tools, these new opportunities, which is the digital media. This is a big step forward. This is a really game changer. Now we're not drawing or modeling, we're playing with information. So we mostly work with Revit, which is part of the BIM. Speed and BIM is a concept really big. It could be a big topic and maybe another discussion. Revit in particular is the program that we use to generate our 3D models, but also to manage all the data that we can generate in the project. So the project is not something static, it's something that changes all the time. And all these elements help us to have a bigger control of how these changes happen, not only in terms of design, because design is always a changing thing, but when the project finishes, there's never a stage where the project is done and never changed. And what we want to do is we create different tools inside of Revit. I don't know if most of you are used to Revit, but works with these packs of information called families. And what we're trying to do is find the most of them, trying to use them in the more experiential way. So we're producing some different families that can interact with how the model changes. We can have the reaction from the model. We can have information in real time of how this change affect in some aspect that otherwise will take a long time to understand. So it can be cost or it can be regulation. So we can have a really quick reaction from the program in the way we are producing and managing the space. And that's really helpful to focus on design and to focus on what is best for the people and saving times and making sure we're working in the right direction. So this control completely changed the way to understand in this particular case, the workplace, because traditionally it can look like something quite static, but what we learn and what we know for sure now is the workplace is going to be something they're going to have a lot of phases. It's not going to be a workplace where everybody works. Each people is going to work in a completely different environment, and they're going to be completely flexible and changing on the time. And we try to optimize them as much as possible with all these tools and control over time. So what can happen in the future?
Revit essentially is kind of a package that helps you almost build an entire building digitally, which to a certain extent is fascinating because families obviously are almost the blocks within that contain the information, which you can then sort of build in, like you were saying, all of these things regarding sustainability or regulations, or all the information that maybe isn't affiliated in different programs that we used to use in the past, which I find fascinating, really.
Yeah, it's completely different. It helps us modeling and understanding volumetry and also create the typical plans and all this information, but we are not working anymore with drawings. We're working with information. And when you create a piece of furniture or when you create a wall, what you're telling the program is what this object is. What is this relation with the time? How can it change?
I was going to say, do you think that kind of off the back of that, then, that digital content can kind of, in a way, affect that we react and we'll see spaces in the real world? Because obviously when you're building it in this way, in a digital format, you're able to allow clients to kind of interact with it prior to it being built. So the actual final result is that people are able to interact with the space in a totally different way when it's sort of realized, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And also give it the opportunity to keep learning and keep bringing information from the project after it's been built. So we have this example of the digital twins where all what's happening in the real world is being processed on our digital model, and it can tell you in advance problems that we might have in the future. So it can be with some elements that can break because they are being used for a long time, or it can be in terms of how many people can bring in the space, how these people using the space. And they give us information to keep changing and keep learning on the way we will design in the future, because it's never going to stop. And that's the interesting part. We have all these elements, like we're all using QR codes in the restaurant now, thanks to, because of what's happening. But also we hear about the augmented reality and all these elements that are going to be a real thing in the future.
There's a question that's actually just come through from Tony asking about VR, and I think that's a really fascinating thing that we were actually talking about prior to that, about experience and about allowing people to use that. I'd love you to kind of talk a little bit about the VR side and the ability to kind of experience a space digitally as well as in reality.
It's really interesting, and also the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. In the virtual reality, what we can do is we can create this parallel, this digital twin where we can bring ourselves in with these glasses and all these elements, and we can experience a place that will happen from the digital environment, but we also can experience augmented reality. And now that you were talking about new generations, we learned what happened with this game Pokemon Go was really popular when the game was connected to the real world and people have to go outside to see what's happening. We can link this to our spaces as well, and our digital media can react in the way we react with the space. I think this is really interesting both. I think we have a lot to learn from now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of to summarize the other question was about how digital content can affect the way that we interact with real spaces. Do you think that is something that can affect it, or do you think that almost the digital the ability to build digitally actually aids our ability to react with spaces?
This is definitely a tool that makes us more powerful, because the more tools that we have to understand and control what is happening in our project, it gave us so much power in bringing us the best experience for the user, because at the end, all what we're doing is what is better for the people. We're trying to use all this technology to optimize and try to make the best experience for, in this case, in the workspace, to try to make people as happy as possible and be able to enjoy their space and be really happy in what we've done and have a space that really adapt for what they need, which is going to change all the time.
From like a technical perspective, how does VR work with Revit? Is it quite a simple thing? Is it something you can almost talk clients through? And is it something that you regularly do as a designer with clients in-house?
It's really interesting because you have a lot of different programs that are linked to each other. And this is something that we're experiencing also, not that only with virtual reality, but in the way we manage data. We can connect Revit to different programs, and we can have a person who doesn't really need to know anything about Revit working in an Excel file, and our Revit can read what they're doing and implement it in our model. This is maybe a bit far from what you were asking, but the way all these programs are linked is really useful, because once you have the 3D model with all the information you need, you can use any other tool to create this virtual space. And it's actually really just easy to do and really helpful sometimes for the client to understand what this is, how this space is going to work, and to really feel it, which is an amazing thing.
I think that's what's quite fascinating, because I think sort of bringing it back to the original kind of conversation about Minecraft and actually talking with children and the future generation, I think one of the conversations that I was having with yourself was about the fact that we are designers at the moment, but we are from a generation maybe that didn't have this type of technology, and we're almost designing for a future generation that doesn't actually they're going to be growing up, they're born with this kind of digital content around them all the time. And I'd be interested kind of to know whether or not you think that that's something that kind of develops as part of, and you love being kind of part of that process in terms of designing those types of spaces.
I think what the new generations are going to do with technology is amazing. We cannot even imagine. When I grow up, I was playing with blocks and building myself real thing, but I also, as we said before, we're part of both worlds. I also play video games and stuff, and the way it changed, these video games and this virtual interaction changed the way you think and the way you can imagine the future. And I think what they are going to create it's going to be amazing, and they're almost here, and they have all these.
Yeah.
When a kid grab an iPad, when they look like they're IT experts, like where did you learn that? And
yeah,
it's going to be amazing. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, no, I was going to say it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly adding to that I think what I want to talk a little bit about later on, like, when you think about Minecraft, it's kind of like the Lego of the future. Like, we're used to like looking at Lego as a bit of an object and trying to look at this as a three-dimensional kind of thing. Kids these days are kind of like embedded into this like virtual world and this kind of like 3D kind of scenario, right? That we just, when we were growing up, I mean, at least me, I sound like very old right now. It was more like bidimensional, right? Like we just would look at things as an object, but never being part of it. And I think kids have that very embedded into like their, day by day, which it's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I would love actually sort of moving on from that. It's quite a natural sort of conversation to kind of flow that way would be, I'd love you to kind of discuss a bit more about the actual concept of the Minecraft project and actually the BDG involvement of it and kind of go through that.
Sure. So I mean, it might sound like a little bit a bit like a pitch, but like, you know,
no.
We are aware. I mean, it's kind of we're aware that in a way, like, times are changing, and you know, the workforce is changing, and the spaces that we design are changing, right? So the first question that, you know, internally when we're looking at this is like, you know, how can we make the design, you know, when being like super like people centric, right? So we changed even the way that we present projects. Like normally we would present a project like, you know, in the old times with like a plan, sort of like a render, and like that's how kind of like, you know, a render in a way it kind of gives you a very sort of like a focused view that you cannot see around, right? As soon as you give a 3D environment to a person, you lose a lot of control, right? So you need to, you know, on very early stages of the project, you need to design everything. Like, you know, normally when you're in a pitch, like originally, like you would just like focus in a bit and like go all at it at that specific sort of like view, right? But having these 3D tools like, you know, like AR and VR, it kind of puts you a bit in trouble, right? So you need to understand like right in the beginning, like kind of like, you know, it's a lot of power to a client or to a user to see the project in a 3D way. So, you know, we know that the people that hire us already understand the design aesthetic, right? Like our design aesthetic. So we focus the graphics more into like in the way that we present the project on how do you use the building, like how do you use the project, you know, like where do you leave your umbrella when the day it's raining, like probably you guys will get a couple weeks in London. How do you know, like hide away from your colleagues whenever you want to focus, right? So I think if you look at the way that the graphic language of presenting a project, right? If it tells you how you're going to use the space more than the, I think you're winning. Like there's a lot of people that don't really understand like a plan, right? So having that flow of like you want into building and so on. So when we look at, you know, the reality is that a lot of the work that we work with, you know, that we do for is for creative agencies, and they basically nurture themselves of having younger people, right? So we were like, okay, so let's step back a little bit, and we started to think on, you know, what platforms attract, you know, that skill, younger people, unleash creativity, and you know, and we also got to think that, you know, the spaces that we're designing and, you know, and overall like the overall process and design and architecture, it takes a bit of time, right? So how, I mean, it sounds a bit exaggerated, but how do we design a space for the workforce of like 5 or 10 years from now, right? So with that in mind, we started, I mean, I'm gonna talk about Detroit as our kind of a
go for it.
Right? Because, you know, we started kind of we have a change program in the office that, you know, kind of explains people that part of the community, like the community that is going to be part of that campus, on how to use the building on day one, right? So how can we, you know, connect to people even though the project's not done yet, because it's not, like how can we get people in the project not only by having a view of, you know, an atrium space or the pantry or so on, right? So we connected with kind of like the nerdy people at the new campus, and how can we translate our design into a Minecraft environment. And like the cool thing about Minecraft is that, you know, you can actually have like a full-on 3D tour, and you don't got to be there. You're just, you know, on your computer at home. So the part of the strategy that we've done on the project itself is that spaces are very reconfigurable, right? And you know, you gotta teach people how to use the space. And I'm gonna link a little bit on what Javier was talking about.
This is fascinating, because I do think yeah.
And you know, how can you know, if you pass the Minecraft sort of model to your nephew or your kid, and they can see where, you know, where you go and work every day, or where you're going to work. So we were really excited about the feedback that we got from this project, and now the greatest thing is that we're making this kind of like a global initiative for all the projects that we're working on that specific client, which it's pretty cool, you know. Like, and the great thing is that, you know, on day one, and you know, we know that you know, everyone is kind of like ready to go back to the office to collaborate and kind of like take this Zoom environment a bit, you know, on the old past. But we know that this is kind of part of that collaboration. Like, we know that working from home and working from the office is kind of is going to be linked always, right? So things like that, for example, like me having a chat with the London Society, and I'm like, what, 5 hours away, you know, from you guys, it's still a thing. But collaboration, and we're social animals, right? So the great thing about it is that, you know, by having this kind of environments, you can actually understand how you can change and use the space depending the need that you know, how you want to collaborate that day. So having a pitch that you're going to work in a pitch with someone from LA and New York, or your main team is in, I don't know, in Prague, like that's still a thing. So having a tool that is like, I would say that a kid can use. I mean, it sounds a bit messed up, but it's like,
no,
it's a great tool for us as designers to have, right? And in a way, I mean, we know that the graphics are not that incredible. I mean, Minecraft graphics are pretty cool, but they're not as realistic as you would expect from like a proper render. But what is important is that we can express the way that the space can be used, right? Which is,
I was going to ask you actually as a follow-up kind of question to that was, so in your opinion, how will new generations, so for example, like the digital natives, understand the creative process in a different way than we do now? Because it kind of ties into the way people are developing.
Kids, I'd say like kids are like the ultimate beta testers. You know, like as soon as they kind of like figure out how like a new technology is, you know, like they make something out of it, and like they push the boundaries, they break the rules. Like I play actually remotely with my nephew Mario Kart, and like he does things that, I mean, I'm an old guy, and like now, and like, and kids understand.
Hey, I love Mario Kart.
They understand the 3D environment in a way that, you know, I still don't fully get. So I you know, like thinking that kids in a way, like they like Minecraft, as I was saying, like it's so immersive, and it just lets you build worlds that, you know, they're kind of, you know, mind blowing, right? Like the digital bricks, like I like calling it the digital bricks, because, you know, having like what Javier was saying about the families, like you have a certain set of parameters and a certain set of families, but you can do whatever you like gravity doesn't exist, you know, and you can play with that and like create kind of like parallel worlds with that digital world, and what for us is kind of like, you know, design and architecture and workplace in general, right? So so for example, like, you know, like having that experience of you know, kids understand axis, like the 3 axes, in a way that we don't. Like we were born with, like, you know, sort of like super like normal Nintendo, which is like very like 2D, right? And like for me, like if I go on my phone and I try and do something in a 3D environment, I'm like a bit like what do I do? And you give that to like a 5-year-old and just like they just go at it, right? So it's incredible to see something that for us that we're working in, you know, like in workplace and interiors and architecture, like to try and get someone that is, you know, a kid and understand the space and how they can change it, and how, you know, it's like The Sims. Like, you know, if you don't feed the dog dies, right? So having that sort of experience that the kid can, you know, see all the parameters that you have in something that you design, it's incredible. It's an incredible tool, and like, you know, you have all these like different hidden places in your designs, you know, like hidden, like, you know, like storage areas that you had no idea, and then suddenly there's like a dragon, you know, like it's mind-boggling to see, like, you know, your you know, the team effort in a design in a different sort of platform, right? That is not what we're used to, right?
It's funny that you mentioned Sims, because when my little cousin was looking at Revit, and I was like, "Oh, what is that? Is that Sims?" And it's crazy how similar the way they work.
Yeah.
Obviously for different things, but the basics of how these packs of information that you can move and you can update is so similar and is so useful for them.
We actually had a really interesting question here from Amy, who was asking about The Sims and saying, to be honest with you, I totally agree with what Amy said here, because she said that the demographic which came up with The Sims in their 20s, like they're in their 20s now. I mean, I actually use Sims all the time as a child. I probably sat in front of the computer a little bit too much, and they're becoming established in the workforce now. And is Minecraft so different to what we've seen in The Sims?
So imagine Sims on like steroids.
Oh,
like,
okay.
It's like, imagine a Sim, so you can actually
much
like,
more possibilities.
Like the kitchen, like you design a kitchen, but you have like 1,000 parameters that you didn't have when you were working with the Sims, right? So you know, it's kind of like the evolution, like a la 700 of Sims, right? Like gravity was a thing on the Sims, like that's one that kind of like messes up with my mind the most, when like you have stuff that doesn't have gravity. But you kind of like try and, you know, put a reality to it, but there's no need, right? So that's it's not too far from that. But I think the amount of flexibility that the software, like the game has, is just insane. And when I play Minecraft, I mean, I'm a grown adult, and I sound a bit awkward saying it, but like when I play it,
no.
I still play it as kind of The Sims, because there's a reality sort of factor there that I add to, that it doesn't really need to happen, right? You can actually just push it way more.
I think also kind of, I guess, sort of bringing Alex into the conversation as well about the sort of digital tools being almost like a superpower, you know, like I love, like, to be honest, I love your passion about like Mario Karts and like getting involved in a digital, you know, like all of these things are so exciting for children and people to use. And I think that my sort of question to bring Alex into the conversation, which I think, to be honest, his expertise are a little bit different, and it's actually quite fascinating, because I think that talking about how you can use digital programs to aid different types of creatives based on the same theme of experience. And my question really to you is that you're working with brands on some of the sort of static elements like logos and things like that, but then how do you bring and utilize digital programs to drive that kind of experience that we're kind of talking about in the conversation of like Minecraft and, you know, all of these different interactive ways of developing and building and creating experience?
Yeah, you know, it's crazy, because I think even as soon as 10 years ago, when I graduated from university and actually started working, a lot of the jobs that I was required to do was literally just present things like a logo on a page. And more recently, and I think it's really interesting that we're talking about, you know, children kind of becoming used to just having everything be interactive and being able to kind of play in their own space, because I kind of feel as though it's just generally where society's heading. Because now, if I come up with an idea for something, I have to use things like Photoshop to make it look real in on a real billboard or on a real building, just to kind of get people to actually have a visual aid of what things look like. Or, you know, I can't just think about how something might look on a page just statically on a piece of paper, because, you know, a letterhead is something that's quite boring and dull for people to look at. So, you know, whenever I'm creating a new brand, one of the tricks in my arsenal is to animate whatever I come up with in whatever way. And you know, Adobe is changing all the time to kind of come up with new tools that you can use yourself in order to enhance the process of delivering what your client ultimately wants, which is probably not going to be things like an animation or some kind of weird 3D environment, but you know, you feel as though you have to give it to them anyway, because they're kind of expecting it, even though in realistic terms they're probably not going to use it unless they kind of keep hiring you. And it's good to kind of know it so that they do keep hiring you. But yeah, one of the things that I've been using recently is a program called Cinema 4D, and that is it's quite similar to something that I think a lot of architects might use, in a sense that it helps you to build 3D environments. And brands are using this program more and more at the moment to deliver more on what they can show people to kind of look at, because people are expecting something which is more tactile now, and that does involve animation, and it involves things that a graphic designer like myself wouldn't have really had to think about like 10, 15 years ago, like texture and lighting and creating a mood. And, you know, it's not only just with something as specific as a program that would help you turn something 3D or help you animate something in some way, it's also the entire process. Like graphic design, you know, the word branding is literally to do with branding cattle, and a logo is, you know, it kind of derives from just that poker being branded into the backside of a cow. I think.
We'll take it as fact, Alex.
Yes, it is fact. But you know, nowadays the the profession has kind of grown up so much and so quickly that now whenever I take on some work, it's not only creating a logo, you know, branding isn't just creating a logo, it's creating what we call a brand world, which encompasses everything. And it's not only what you see visually, it's how, you know, if I'm going to do this for a company, I have to think about them as not a company, but almost like an extra person in the room who's right next to me, which is really interesting. So, you know, it's almost like the logo is just, it's just a little signature, but then you have to think about what would this person speak like? What would they say? What impression would they give to everybody else in the room? When they leave the room, what would other people say about them? And that in itself is almost like a virtual experience for everybody to kind of interact with, not in a physical sense where you've got a program that can help you walk through a room, but it's almost psychology that gets inside your head. I think it's like people are becoming so much more sophisticated in the technology that they use day to day, but also what they expect from that technology and what they expect from everybody who's providing a service for them.
I have a little sort of, I guess, hopefully an interesting question for you, in terms of kind of relating it back to like workspace design from like a branding perspective and from like your expertise. How do you think that sort of digital and being able to animate and create experiential kind of spaces rather than just like a branding on the walls and things like that for, you know, for creative office spaces or whatever, do you find that that's something that's actually really exciting to you, or it's almost, you know, it's like a different world, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's, do you know what, I've had the opportunity to kind of brand some workspaces, and I think that the kind of the main things that we started to come up with after a while was, okay, so you've got the general signage, which is kind of what you'd expect a graphic designer to kind of think about. You brand the space and then you make the appropriate signage so that people could go around, blah, blah, blah. But then I think to kind of go back to the analogy of the brand being an extra person in the room, you know, you almost have to think about, okay, this is an extra person you've kind of created. How would they decorate their house as well? And then if I think about how I would decorate my house, or if I was like a millionaire, I guess, like one of the things that I would personally really want recently is this Samsung TV that looks like a picture frame on the wall.
Oh, I really like that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I know exactly which one you mean as well.
Yeah, and then like you can just turn it on and play The Sims on it, which would be amazing. But the rest of the time, it's really subtle, and that's my personality. But then, you know, and there's also things like smell, which you know you don't really usually think about if you're a graphic designer. But then, you know, I find myself whenever I'm designing a space thinking, you know, what would be the experience of somebody walking through this to really get an impression of what this company's about. And I remember like I once had to design or do a brand for a space where every floor had a distinct color to tie it together, to kind of almost give each floor a different personality, but also all of the soaps in the bathrooms had to be kind of like a certain scent, but then that same scent would also just kind of be poofing around the hallways as well. So on each floor you'd have like a different vibe going on, and even different music. Like, you know, again, people are becoming so sophisticated that they're expecting everything to kind of like almost wow every single sense that you have out there. And I think I'm really sorry if I'm just
no this to be honest, it leads on, like, I guess, to kind of what I wanted to do now really is open it out to everyone, to all guests, because I think you've all got really interesting points to kind of say on this subject. And I think that, to be honest, from the conversation we've had so far, experience seems to be the main word that ties us all together in our craft and all the different sort of elements that we're involved in, and particularly within sort of workspace design, and obviously the Minecraft sort of theme that we're talking about here, and children. And I would love to know really experience and how you see that in the future of workspaces and the design of it. And I mean, feel free just to shout out, to be honest.
I think I want to link something that Alex and Javier spoke earlier, that like what you were talking about, Alex, about like how people decorate their house. Like sometimes, like when you see what the Minecraft environments, you know, what kids generate on the Minecraft environments, that you kind of like you look at it and you're like, that's a bit weird. But like you kind of think about the possibilities, you know, of like having a tree in the middle of an office space, right? Or having, I mean, it's a bit cheesy somehow, but like there's a reason why the kid plays that there, because, you know, maybe there's like, I don't know, that's where they get apples for the pantry or so on. But in addition to that, like seeing that how workspace in a way transforms in a 3D environment like Minecraft, what we're now working with a project is that mixing, you know, looking at the different possibilities that a space has and like what the experience of that space is. So linking that with Revit and actually using AR to teach people how to use that space and how that space can transform. So it's creating like the IKEA instruction set, but on a virtual sort of environment using Revit families. So whenever you walk into a space and you see like a bunch of furniture around that, you're like, okay, so how I'm actually going to use this. You use the AR and you see basically where the different pieces of furniture have to be in order for you to have a pitch meeting or collaborating with I don't know, like a group of 20, or so it kind of like, it's like the manual of how can that experience change in a space of like, you know, 4 meters by 4 meters with like 2 stools, a chair, a high table, a TV, and a speaker, right? So how that environment gets transformed, linking both the crazy talk, you know, like what when you see like a space that there's no order or rhythm to it, but then looking at the way that can be transformed with the difference, or like just by scrolling you see basically the space, you know, being changed using Revit. I think that's like the best experience. Like I mean, it might sound a bit complicated.
That's what I love. Yeah.
Still polishing it, right? But you know, just with a simple QR code and you know, like you start putting your parameters. Like my meeting is gonna have 5 people. I need to have I'm gonna have a client in, but I'm also gonna have a client somewhere else. So you know, there's acoustic requirements there that we need to think about as well on that experience. So just by adding those different parameters, you can link it into like what Javier was talking about, and create a space that basically changes the way that you feel or the way that you work and the way that you collaborate. So I'm like super excited about like things like it's like using AR, I think is going to be like the way forward on transforming, because we have the space and we all know that we want to collaborate and we all know that we want to go into the office to like just, you know, do your thing. But how do you teach people how to use it and have the best experience out of it? I think is the way that design and our jobs is gonna be, right? Because like, you know, I think I don't know. There's a lot that we can get from.
I think it's fascinating. I think Javier, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I just wanna keep listening because everything's so interesting. I was listening, was like, wow, this is so interesting, and also how this technology is horizontal to all of us, no matter what you do. We end up in a similar context, in a similar way to approach the reality from a digital perspective to make it real. And the next step, which is and learn from it, because of the amount of data that we collect, the possibilities where you can change with your phone, you can change the color of the light, you can change if your meeting is going to be booked, if it's not going to be booked, you can change if it's going to be. It's amazing, and also all of that is information for us. We keep learning and hopefully to use it for improve everything.
I was going to say as well, if anyone has any questions or anything they want to throw in for the guests, then please now feel free just to put them into the chat. I mean, to be honest with you, I have a few questions myself, so I'll just keep asking whilst there's questions that kind of keep coming in. But one of the things that I really wanted to discuss, which I think is really important, is actually the whole sort of human-centric side of it. And actually, we're talking about digital programs as a real power, Minecraft being an incredible tool for children and interaction and things, but how do we ensure that we always have the human and the experience at the forefront of our mind in terms of workplace design? You know, I guess we're designing these spaces for the user and the people. I'd be interested to kind of get everyone's opinion on that in terms of the realities as a designer, ensuring that you're advising clients in the right way, and also children when we're working with them when they're building in Minecraft and things?
In my experience, it's been really interesting using these kind of intelligent families because they react so quick to what you're proposing, and you save so much time checking all these parameters that the program tells you in a second, like, this doesn't work, or it would work better like this. And you can focus so much on the human side, on what is the experience of going there. You can rely on some topics on the program, and you talk together, and your part is focused 100% of human experience, human interaction. And I think this is a really high value for designers to make the space appropriate for how people is going to use them.
I think you need to in order for your design to be a success, you need to let people kind of roll, and that's kind of like with the overall like human, like if you give the blocks, that's how I think like you can assemble a space and you can change the way that the space changes and get those parameters. I do like what Javier was talking about, the data stuff, because with this sort of these tools, like you can get so much for your future projects as well. You can understand a little bit better of like what works, what doesn't work. You can actually see a real time and in the digital world if your design is a success or not. Like if I don't know. I think it's all so intertwined and so connected.
And also, Alex, I'd be interested to know from sort of a brand experience and how you ensure that always it's the consumer that they're kind of like looking at, rather than actually the experience that they're creating and getting kind of too caught up in the digital programs that you can use.
Do you know what? There's actually a bit of a trait that some designers have sometimes, where they tend to design something for their portfolio where rather than something that people can actually use. And I think the way to really keep like that human experience in the forefront of everything that you do is just to make it accessible. And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. It's like, one of the standard things that we always have to do as designers is create guidelines for everything that we create, so that anyone could come along and just pick it up, even if it is a program that they might not be able to use. If you've used something and you want people to experience and replicate the brand and really be an ambassador for it and do a good job, of the brand or for the brand, you need to teach people how to use it. And I think being patient and giving people the tools and telling them about the tools and teaching them how to use them is the way forward.
Alex, connected to that, like we at BDG, we did a poster for returning to work after COVID, right? Where
I saw that was good.
Yeah, graphical, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to explain, like, everyone in the studio how the different things that are going to change, right? And one of the parameters that we took when starting this project was that people were going to be way bigger than they're actually, like the scale of the people were going to be bigger. Just so you feel that there's actually enough interaction with the space, so that's sort of like connecting with the distancing and only one person in the kitchen at a time, and you see the people, you see them being like the center of it. Like even like the office itself is not, it kind of it takes a second layer, right? Like the most important thing is the people like moving around the space. So it kind of, I think it ties up a little bit with what you were saying, which and makes it like very like sort of like, I don't know, dump proof.
We've got a fairly an interesting question that came through from Alan. It's quite a lengthy question, but just to kind of summarize, and hopefully I summarize it in the right way. But one of the things he puts is, how useful will each tech be to architecture as a whole, and what could the presenters, so as take away from the responses from the developing our own future thinking? So I guess there's kind of two questions here, in that actually how important is technology in the development of architecture as a whole? I think that could be the first question.
I mean, it's very connected to Javier's bit, and I like that he mentions machine learning. I think that's, I mean, it's a bit of a slippery slope there, because until when is our job going to become a bit irrelevant? That's like one thing that I worry about. Because I mean, it's all parameters, like design in a way, like there's a lot of, there's a lot of aesthetics involved, but on what we're kind of like currently discussing, I think there's so much that we can add and so many layers that we can add to like the different bits that when you remove all of those different sort of parameters and you have like what I was saying about like the no gravity bit, right? I think that's the future in a way. Like that's how can we design spaces without like that many sort of I don't know, like just thinking on the full on reality of things. That's when you get the best responses, like when you kind of like think beyond the axis. I don't know, I kind of made that a bit more confusing than it was.
No, I think it's really important to discuss actually when the human becomes irrelevant, and actually I think that's kind of bringing it back around almost to the start point, really, from what Javier was saying about you can utilize these incredible programs, but fundamentally you're designing this building for the person, and whether or not that's the future person who's been born into digital world, they're still human and living in the real world, and they need to be able to experience the space in the right way. And I think that, in my opinion at least, I feel like there'll never be a point where robotics will completely eradicate humanity, because there's just that sort of human emotional connection and psychology of space. And for me, strategy of design is a whole new subject, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah, do you know what? This actually touches on what I wrote my dissertation on a little bit. Again, like, jobs, or my job specifically has changed a lot in the last 10 years, definitely in the last, 50, 100 years. There wasn't even anything, it wasn't even computers. But I think the more technology that comes along and solves a problem that we think that we have now, I don't think it'll ever kind of take over what we do as humans, because the professions that we're all in, or the spaces that we're all in, and how we even use those spaces will evolve around what new technology is there. And we'll probably just find a completely different problem that we want to solve, and then we'll create something to solve that, and then it'll just kind of keep going on and keep going on. And
I think it ties in as well to Morgan's question here about our reliance on software. Yeah, sorry, you're gonna
I love that question, Morgan. Because
read it out, because just for everyone who maybe hasn't. No, I was going to say, for people who maybe haven't seen it, Morgan's question is our reliance on software to develop buildings and designs. Are we going to become limited in our creativity by the capabilities of the software, of which Jorge has an answer?
I mean, that's like, in this case, like, I think Autodesk is the villain, right? Like, I think it's sorry, Javier, that's kind of like your world and the Revit stuff, but in my case, I think that having software, like, again, sorry that I keep talking saying Minecraft, but it's $27 average, and the possibilities that you have in a software like that is just mind blowing, right? So I do think, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a full on design tool in the sense of generating documentation for drawings and like the real sense of like the architect or the designer, but in the way of like as a creative tool, I do think that having something that is as accessible as that, it's incredible. Like it's just mind-boggling, right? So I don't think, I mean, it sounds, it's, I don't know, I don't think that it will limit our creativity. I do think that having something that it gives you the opportunity to express something in a three-dimensional way in a virtual world that is accessible to everyone, even to a kid, like a 4-year-old kid, it's insane, right? It's
I think it's interesting how different programs are good in different stages of the project. And the Minecraft, for example, can be really good for creativity, and it can even implement the creativity. And then we can jump to different programs, maybe Revit, who help you control how this is going to transform in a real world. And maybe we have another programs after that control the data and the machine learning. And another program will give us feedback, and this feedback will implement the Minecraft. And we need all these tools. And they make every stage of the process of the from creativity to reality much better. And when you say the word superpowers, it's actually what you feel when you can have all this information so quick, which otherwise was impossible, and you see all these amazing spaces that otherwise was really difficult to build or at least control.
I think that's really fascinating. And just to kind of round up, I guess, which I think is really great because it ties in your comments just then to the last two questions. So one from Anna saying that it's a fascinating conversation about the intersection of brand and space, but also in a world which has recently become digitalized. And in this moment of connecting tech and humans together. And also, in addition to that, Paul's comment as well, which I guess we've kind of answered in the conversation, but the ability to use Minecraft actually opens up our ability to plan and design, because it's not limited to people who have the expertise in Revit and things like that, which are obviously much more complex, but it means that children get a chance to get involved in the design process. And just to kind of wrap up, I think it'd be really great if I could get like a one-liner sentence from each of you just to kind of summarize your opinion on the topic that we've just had, whether or not it's one word or a sentence or just something just to kind of summarize your view on the conversation.
I will call Minecraft the future sketch.
Ooh.
You know, just like it's just, you know, I mean, pen and paper is there and it's always going to be there. But I do think that having the opportunity to express a space three-dimensionally for someone that doesn't know how to properly draw, I think it is a very powerful tool.
Nice. No, that's perfect. And Alex, next, if that's all right. You're next on my screen, so I'll
I think for me, it's just the opportunity that almost the idea that you could play with something and that could actually create something amazing in the real world, just like what Jorge was saying earlier, where kids were just putting apples in the middle of their houses, so that because that's where an apple tree in the middle of the house because that's where the apples came from, and then you could actually just put a tree in a real space. Like I find that amazing. I like the idea that play can affect the world around us in a really positive way, and I think that's such a very optimistic way of viewing what technology could do for us.
And also Javier, just to round up with your views as well, would be great.
I think it's just incredible how we're just at the beginning of this new way of thinking, and how in this new way of design there's no limit, and even a kid can be an active part of a complex design. I think this opens the opportunities so much, and what we're going to see from now is going to be definitely amazing.
Oh, well, I'd like to just firstly say thank you to the guests. I feel like we had a really great conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot and also feel quite inspired as well. So I'd like to just say thank you to each and every one of you. In addition to that, thanks to everyone who has been involved with the Q&A. Your questions were really relevant and really interesting. And also thanks for listening in. And before we all kind of log off, we do have another conversation coming soon, which will be on the 27th of May. And the topic is why the post-pandemic world needs high-level thinking. And that will be with Jorgo of Rainlight. And it will be an equally interesting conversation. And we'd love you to be part of it as well. So thank you ever so much to everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Cool.